Hello, and welcome to another exciting episode of Reboot It. Tonight we're joined by
Mark Boltz-Robinson.
Hi Mark. How's it going?
Going well.
Thanks for joining us again. It's been probably nearly 2 months since we've done. You were on the last show, if I recall correctly.
I think that was December before Christmas.
It was December. It was the first week of December, for Christmas. It would have been
holiday chaos.
Oh, it's been crazy around here. The last episode was December the 2nd, which was probably actually recorded in November. But anyway, I'm glad you're here. So let's talk about the announcements. AID 2017 is April 3rd through the 7th. We're going to do information security on April 6th and April 7th. The Marshall University Forensic Science Center in Huntington, West Virginia. Call for papers is open. Call for sponsors is also open. The website's in the process of being updated. I guess if you want to submit, or if you want to dump a ton of dough in our lap, reach out to me and I'll make sure that the people get it. B-Sides Nova, February 25th, 2017. Is there a website for that?
I think there is. I threw that in there because I wanted people to understand that I didn't hold them any ill will.
Okay.
We're having another B-Sides right in the greater Washington, D.C. area as a co-member of B-Sides D.C. I'm all for additional knowledge, learning, Locksport Village, get your stuff out there, be heard. My only grudge with them initially was that they were like right in that middle September, end of September crunch where we've already got Derby, B-Sides DC, Skydog Con, and all this, and B-Sides Charm and everything. We're kind of like all in this
Secure WV.
Yeah.
Well, we actually moved out of October into November for that reason.
Yeah. So, and B-Sides Charm, which is also further down the list here,
right,
is now in April 29th and 30th. So I think we're all kind of finding better wiggle room. So I encourage, especially since this is, beyond ShmooCon, and, ShmooCon, of course, is difficult to get into these days. Your F5 skills have to be on point. I've never succeeded in getting an actual ticket.
I only succeeded getting tickets, by submitting papers, and I think they may have stopped doing that. I'm not sure.
Yeah, and the only way I think I got a ticket was because we had Bruce Potter as our keynote the first year of B-Sides DC, so he let me just lurk in the halls for the part of one afternoon.
Oh, that's cool.
So anyway, B-Sides Nova, it's another DC area opportunity for folks to check out. It is February 25th. I believe the Twitter handle is the same, at B-Sides Nova, all together. So at least that should get you started. And I think you can get to it from the securitybsides.com primary mothership website as well.
Awesome. B-Sides Nashville with Amanda Berlin as the keynote. I should have reached out to Amanda. I didn't get a chance to today. We'd like to have her back on soon. She's now an official co-host of the Breaking into Security podcast.
Yes, it's awesome. And she's got her book, on pre-order from Amazon for
I need to do that.
There's so few blue team books in comparison to the plethora of red team books out there for the red hat versus white hat folks. So I'm looking forward to my copy. I got a few sneak previews here and there as a technical consultant, editor, whatever it is that they're called. So looking forward to that. And B-Sides Nash sounds like it's going to be an awesome time. I hope to get to it, but it's going to be work dependent, because if billable comes first, then that's that.
That is true. And that's the problem, is there's so many great conferences. It's hard to make them to them all. and I just had to turn down an opportunity to go to a conference recently. I was invited to, and I had to say I don't have any travel money, so I'm kind of only planning on really going back to Derby this year. And the conferences I do are probably going to be it. Although Nashville's drivable from here, but it's still a long drive. But
Yeah, and I know that Derby's unfortunately out of the question for me because we'll be
that
doing
sucks.
our annual pilgrimage to
I saw
Germany.
that. I saw that you got your reservations. Is that what it was?
Yeah, table reservation at Oktoberfest. So
Awesome.
you just have to agree to drink so much beer and eat so many chickens, and that's your reservation. So
Oh, really? Well, that sounds like I'd be cut out for that. Um, I like beer and chicken.
yes, and
B-side,
there's something about their roasted chickens that is just totally on point. So,
B-sides Charm, April 29th through the 30th at the Baltimore Convention Center in Baltimore, Maryland. CFP is open. www.bsidescharm.com. ThoughtCon in Chicagoland, May 4th through the 5th. ThoughtCon.org. Hack Miami, May 19th to the 21st. Is in Miami, Florida, not Miami, Ohio, so don't get confused. www.hackmiami.com. Do you have any other announcements, Mark?
no, I think that's about it.
SecureWD/HackerCon will be at the same time as it was
Woohoo!
past year, which is the weekend before Thanksgiving. It seemed to work out. The hotel loves us, and they already invited us back, and I believe that we're already booked. So I think we're good to go.
Awesome.
So the stories we have for this week, some of these are kind of old, but I thought that they were worth talking about. And the top story is Trump taps Giuliani as cyber advisor. So what do you think of this, Mark?
I think this is right in line with a lot of his other appointments. Let's find the person who is demonstrably completely antithetical to the task at hand and give them a position. And this is one of those Trump at least has had for key positions of things he cares about. He at least put some thought into it.
Yeah.
Whereas I think there is like with DeVos for education, for example, I really don't care one way or the other about this department. It could go away as far as I'm concerned. So I'm just going to use this as a boon for somebody that helped me get elected.
Right.
And I'm going to leave it at that. The fact that Giuliani's security website immediately came to light. I mean, just going to Shodan.io and running Giuliani security against, their search to find that this had ancient MySQL fully exposed, relying, I think, only on within the database internals itself, access controls to the database, to having a slew of other ports like IMAP and IMAPs and everything open, and HTTP that did not redirect at HTTPS. I mean, this is a guy who supposedly was a cybersecurity guy, expert, who is going to now be the cybersecurity advisor to the president, and students in one of your introductory information security classes would know more than him. So
sounds like it. It does not look like a good situation, as well as I think that then they find like he was running WordPress that was 100,000 years old.
Yes, with a ton of vulnerable plugins, and
I fear that this is not going to end well. This on Twitter calls them cyber grandpas. These people who have been around forever and they know about the cybers. This is another example of government getting ahead of itself and appointing the person who's probably the least qualified to do what needs to be done. And then I understand that our new president called for a review, which has now been postponed. I should have found that story too. But anyway, basically they're not doing anything about anything at the moment.
Yeah, and there are also, I think, even more detrimentally, they're not giving credit for all of the agencies and the great people in those agencies. You have Emily Corrin, for example, that I
Exactly.
immediately think of, and others who get it, who are trying to improve things and who understand the situation.
Right.
And they're all now discounted, downplayed, sidelined, and handicapped by these circus antics. And I
Right.
think that's incredibly disappointing. But I don't think we've really had a good move at the highest levels of the executive in general in previous administrations either.
No, I agree.
But we're definitely not going in the right direction in this case. We're definitely going in the wrong direction. So,
The next story is MacBook Pro Touch Bar banned from multiple state bar exams. I thought this was a bizarre kind of a story. People either love or they hate the Touch Bar. So, what exactly was the reason that they banned it for bar exams?
I read that, and then I also tried to look for other articles that talked about this as well.
Yeah.
And first of all, their critique about the touch bar is one that comes from an enormously larger set of people than people who actually are in the set of people who own MacBook Pros with
Right.
touch bar. I don't yet have one, so I can't speak to it. From what I've seen of it, it looks interesting. I can't really say, and won't say one way or the other if I find it useful or not, because my MacBook Pro is still a mid 2012. But from
Awesome.
what I understand of the technology and the fact that you can put Doom on it,
Right.
it's interesting. But at the same time, I have to try to understand here, if you're banning it because you think that somehow people are going to embed a cheat sheet in the touch bar, what
Yeah.
are you doing to control those people from using a cheat sheet in any other way in the operating system?
True. You could script it. You could Apple script it. You could Bash script it. You could do
Right.
all kinds of crazy things that would do the
Automator,
same thing. Right.
just the command space bar to get Siri, to get
Yep.
the spotlight. I just don't understand how that is a preventative in any way from what any computing technology. You're allowing somebody to bring in a computing device with I/O capability,
Mm-hmm.
period. Unless you control that device, like I did ages and ages and ages ago when I worked for a university and we actually
Right.
did final exam testing, but I locked down the machine so that the USB ports didn't work, the CD-ROM didn't work, your networking was restricted, etc. I don't see how you're controlling any of that. So the touch bar itself, I think, this makes a great headline because
Yeah.
this is a newfangled contraption in a computer, but I don't see that this makes any difference. And then I think what happened was one of them did it just because. And in the legal space in general, I find that once one law firm or one law anything does something,
Mm-hmm.
they all run with it.
Yeah. You're exactly right.
So,
Well, I worked for law firms and I did it for over 20 years. The common question you heard, if there was a problem, they would say, well, what's everyone else doing about it? Or what's the firm down the street doing with this issue? And I think that happens, also at higher levels. And probably what happened was, as you said, newfangled device. We don't know what it does. We're afraid of it. So therefore, we're going to ban it. And
right.
I also agree that makes a good headline. But there might be smoke, but there's definitely not fire. There's probably a fire without smoke due to the other things we talked about that you could easily script or make cheat sheets in other ways. So the whole thing is silly, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to throw it out there.
Yeah.
This is sort of like how the reason that a lot of people are hackers, uh, computer bad guys are sentenced to long prison terms is because the judge and the jury and the prosecutors don't understand computers, and they're afraid of things they don't understand, like
Right.
saying that it could whistle into a phone and launch ICBMs, which they convinced the federal judge and threw him in solitary for a long time. So it's kind of silly and scary also that we have people who are intelligent who believe these things. So we have two cyber grandpa stories in a row right there. And this one also is a cyber grandpa story. We should just call this episode
Is
Cyber
that
Grandpa.
is that what we're cyber grandpas now?
Not us. These people who don't understand about technology and
Oh well,
do stupid things
I
with it.
think in the general demographics of our space that we probably do
We
qualify
probably are
as
there too,
grandpas
right?
as well. I don't have the ponytail, but
I don't have ponytail either, but yeah, I'm definitely demographically a cyber grandpa.
when I grow up, I do hope to be Jack Daniel.
I do too, as well. Um, he has some of the finest liquor I've ever gotten off somebody else.
Well, that Jim McMurray guy is pretty on point on that too. So
I was at DerbyCon with Jim and only saw him maybe once. That's the problem when you both have booths. It's hard to actually cross paths. I saw Dave Kennedy one time. I think I accused him of hiding. And it's always funny when you see Dave at his conferences. Hey man, what's going on? He'll give you. I'll be right back, and you'll never see him again.
yeah, I have not actually met him in real life, but I do
Oh,
look
he's a great
forward to the
guy.
day. So
He's one of my favorite people in the world.
if I can just get him to move Derby slightly earlier in the year, or maybe a little bit later, then it will work out great. So speaking of cyber grandpas, we have Anonymous, our good friend
Yep.
over there, with their Guy Fawkes masks, publishing
Mhm.
their guide on how to hack Donald Trump's phone on Twitter.
Right. In this case, I think that Donald Trump is a cyber grandpa. Um, oh, no one's going to hack my phone. I know better than everyone else. Um, this is an
Well,
example of just egotism, or
if he knows more about national security than the generals, as apparently is even more the case since he's throwing them out of the National Security Council, then I'm thinking that he probably knows more about cybersecurity than we do as well. So I did find this interesting, though, that they had all this talk, even for Obama and then even George W. Bush. The president historically is run on an antiquated phone,
yeah,
typically Blackberries, because they actually did have decent encryption and control technologies. But to have a Samsung Galaxy S3
hmm
as your personal phone, and we know that because you can easily identify Twitter tweets that come from Trump himself versus one of his aides based on what kind of device it came from.
right.
So it's interesting you have this like ancient Galaxy phone from a guy who supposedly is worth $10 billion. You would think
Right.
he'd have at least an S7.
Well, you could also buy some suits that fit.
That too. And some cool bow ties from Bow Ties Limited of Vermont.
Well, at least some skinnier ties.
That too. So the point is that you've got a device that you can't even hope to upgrade, which is one of the general. I'm not really a big fanboy of a particular operating system or device versus others, but the fracturing of the Android community and the fact that carriers don't allow or push updates to Android devices to get the latest Android with its security measures is problematic. The return time on those devices from the time you purchase it to the time it no longer gets any kind of update is insanely small.
Right.
In general. And so for the president of all people to have a device that's an S3 that can't have anything better than, 4.0 or whatever it is versus the latest and greatest, but that was his personal device too. So then you have to say, well, somebody should step in and say, we hate to take your toy away, but here's this nice government issued secure phone that we control and make sure that others
Well,
can get into it. So
Yeah, in this case, basically what the anonymous is saying is this is how you would go about breaking into an S3,
Mm-hmm.
which is not hard. My students could do it.
And I think that was pointed out in the article as well. They said that this is something you give as an exercise to introductory information security classes on how you root devices and break into them and get access to them. So, but I think even more interesting than this one, I didn't think to put the link in the show notes yet, but there was also the corollary to this story with they figured out that the Gmail, the reset mechanism for Twitter, if you tried to reset the password for POTUS
Mm-hmm.
on Twitter, revealed that it was actually not using a whitehouse.gov or other government
Right,
email,
right.
but it was actually using like ds star 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 dot at gmail.com, and the weaknesses of that reset mechanism as well. And what it revealed about the fact that it was using a personal email and not a government email for the President of the United States, which some people tied back to, the Clinton email server scandal and stuff. I don't know that I buy that because we're in transition and that does take a bit for government to do that kind of setup stuff. But anyway, definitely interesting stuff. And that all ties back, I think, to the Giuliani article about how there's just a lot of people at the highest levels of power that really don't understand what we do for a living. So,
No, unfortunately, no. And my hope is one day we'll have a president that truly grew up with the internet and truly understands technology to the point where they'll do something about it. I think we have people like that in civil service, but they are being set on and not able to do their jobs properly because of bureaucracy and politics.
yeah, don't we have that one senator? Crap, I can't remember his name right now because I'm old. There is the one senator who actually does get technology because he himself,
I know who you're talking about. I can't remember his name either.
I think from California, like actually understands this stuff. Lee, no, not Lee, something like that. Anyway, the point is we have one, but nobody listens to the guy.
Yeah.
He
Well, I
talks
mean,
like science and logic and stuff. And
that's not going to get you anywhere in Congress. The other thing about Trump, and I don't know if you've seen this or not, apparently he still has personal bodyguards mixed in with Secret Service, and that just blows my mind because I wouldn't want some guy with a gun next to me. The shit went down. I'm not sure what that person would do.
yeah, I have to wonder like what the Secret Service has done in terms of planning for those contingencies. And
But
honestly, I would not be surprised if something really crazy happens if those Secret Service agents don't actually pop the
yeah,
personal bodyguards right off the bat just to eliminate the equation.
that may be what their plan is. The other thing that I saw interesting was when he was walking and the inauguration parade, when they told him to get back in the car, he actually argued with them.
Yeah, they really don't like that. And
No, no. So that's got to be an interesting relationship, and the amount of money that taxpayers are spending to secure Trump Tower is astronomical.
yeah, and honestly, no matter what you think of the guy's politics, if you're a supporter or not, the fact that you have a president that wants to maintain that residence when I mean, Bush had Crawford, but at the same time, like he wasn't going. He did vacations. He didn't go back there all the time.
Well, it's also easier to secure Crawford than there is a high-rise building in the middle of Manhattan. You know, Crawford has physical barriers to it.
Right. And it is it's a ranch in
Right.
Texas.
Or even Kenny Bunkport, or any of the places that presidents have gone in the past. A lot of them used to go to Camp David. Who's the last person that went to Camp David? Bush Jr.
Yeah.
Or Carter
It's
was
probably
always
a
going to Camp
derelict
David.
ruin at this point.
It probably is. They're probably not even there anymore. It's probably like you said, probably grown over with kudzu. I don't know. It's a shame. So we have Delta outage.
Yep,
And
which you posted,
United
and then
outage.
I had to add United because I was just thought that the fact that these both happened within 2 weeks of each other made it more interesting.
Makes you go, doesn't it?
So I did notice in the show notes that you did actually link, at least temporarily. This may be corrected by the time this actually goes live, but there is a webinar link to a very young gal. So it's. But anyway,
Is that in the show notes?
Delta and I threw it in there earlier.
Awesome.
The fact that Delta and United both had computer glitches that grounded at least some flight operations within 2 weeks of each other. We've seen this kind of thing happening already over the last year or two.
Yeah.
Where computer glitches are now more and more causing issues. And you think, okay, we all know that computers screw up. Or we say that the computer screwed up.
That's interesting. It's on Sunday, because Sunday in a big iron environment is usually when you do maintenance or you do reboots of like mainframes.
Mm-hmm.
So you kind of wonder if it's related to that.
And it could be something as innocuous as that. But generally, as a rule of thumb, if you have two different airlines with different IT systems, granted, both of them still tie back to Big Iron because the Sabre and underpinning systems that manage cross-airline flight scheduling and ticket transfers and stuff is all part of that.
Right.
But at the same time, two of them, within a couple of weeks of each other is kind of like, like what malware got introduced because these glitches happened and these systems were all rebooted that we won't know about yet.
Right. It's off-roll. It's extremely interesting, and we may never know.
So, but the fact that it also illustrates that we've now shown and publicized for the actual hackers who want to do things.
That's possible.
That these are the systems that you target, because if you take these down, the airline fails miserably. I was actually on United flights because they're my preferred carrier. Delta's my secondary for my Road Warrior stuff. I avoided the United stuff because it was actually only their mainline flights, the actual United versus United Express. And these days it seems, because of where I live, I draw much more United Express everywhere, and I'm on regional jets all the time. But I can see that, down the road that there are weaknesses in the systems for what a target would be for an attacker to just completely drop air travel, period. So,
well, and drop air travel, or one of the things that was, I was driving home the other night and listening to NPR, and they were talking about, it was after someone managed to take down DNS root servers, that we were on the cusp of being able to break the internet. It was the whole Internet of Things attacking like Krebs' site, etc. At what point do we break the internet, or at what point can someone, quote, break the internet? Even if you have an outage like this, it's disconcerting to think that, well, there's not any Delta or United flights in the air at this time because they can't fly, because they were so reliant on computers. It makes you realize how fragile modern society really is. God forbid we would have to go out with electricity for a long period of time.
And it's amazing that it seems to be like so few people that remember the old school way of doing things. It's funny because, being a resident of Vermont, we still actually get, heating oil, and the heating oil comes, and I actually get a receipt for the oil that was delivered that actually comes with carbon paper between two copies of the bill that was printed on a dot matrix printer in the truck.
It's crazy.
And I show the carbon paper to my nephews going, do you even know what this is? And what you can do with this. I mean, it allows you to make a copy of something. That's completely unheard of these days. And at the same time, I have to wonder, how do we not preserve some of the knowledge of, okay, if this all fails, as part of our DR plan, that we actually still have copies of the, flight manifest form 1025 Q7, whatever, in holding, that we can pull out and start going paper, right?
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, that's what Sony had to do after the attack that was attributed to North Korea. They had no computer system. They went back to typewriters and analog phones, or I guess old cell phones, because they were completely dead in the water. I have a colleague who says that what he wants to start a game show, and basically what you would do is you would pull out things like carbon paper and show it to a millennial or somebody, maybe a teenager, and say, what does this do? And then they would have to figure out what it was. Someone said that they showed their kid a cassette tape and they didn't know what that was.
Wow.
But I guess, I don't know. I'm of an age to remember when technology was newish, but I guess there's an age now that doesn't remember a time before the internet, which blows my mind.
Yeah, so at home I actually have a 1939 Royal typewriter.
Nice.
And it still works. Still types perfectly fine. And I actually showed that to my nephews a few weeks ago. They were up for a weekend skiing trip. And was showing them that. And I said, this was made in 1939. So please show me when your smartphone is still working 70 years from now.
There's no way. It's probably not going to work 7 years from now.
Right. So
that's wild to think about it.
Yeah. So this really is turning into the grandpas in internet.
My day, we didn't have the internet. I don't know how we ever found out where parties were.
You need to put in that old man yells at cloud gif.
I tell these stories to my students sometimes. They all just look at me like I'm crazy.
Well, and I had a guy who taught me, who actually had, when he used to teach them management information systems at Penn State in the Smeal College of Business. And he used to actually do a show and tell with his students. He would come out and he had a platter. It was literally about almost a 1/4 inch thick. And it was about, I want to say about 4 feet in diameter. And it was a platter from a hard drive from NASA from the 1970s.
Oh, I'm sure.
And it had about a 1/2 inch gouge in the platter where the head had literally crashed into the drive and scratched the platter. And he would show students that this is data storage in the 1970s, And by the way, this only held 300 kilobytes.
I was going to ask what the capacity was.
It was about 300 kilobytes for just that one platter. So
When I was in graduate school, I had a Mac SE30, and it had a whole, I think it was a whole megabyte. I'm like, I'll never use a megabyte. You know, it's crazy.
So just to put the icing on the cake of the Grandpas and InfoSec episode,
Maybe we
I
should
actually
change the name of the
was
show.
just the other day thinking about old storage technologies, and I remember I had a couple of disks from the Next optical drives.
Nice.
And I was trying to think, I was like, God, how much? It was 250 something. And I was like, it had to be megabytes because 250 gigabytes was unheard of back then.
Yeah.
So I was like 250 megabytes. But I remember thinking 250 megabytes, there's no way I'm going to fill this disk up. And I never did. Unfortunately, now I can't find a Next that can actually read the disk to figure out just how much space I actually used on it. But
my first personal computer was a Mac CD6116 Power PC, and it had, I believe, 100 megabytes in the hard drive, and I filled it up all the time. So you'd fill it up, and you'd have to go back and like delete stuff. And it was the era of shareware. You know, you try something out, and you decide you didn't want it, you didn't like it, you get rid of it, or you would pay for it. Or if you were nefarious, you would go find one of those cracking magazines out on the interwebs and would use the cracking serial key. This is in the 90s. But it was easy to fill up a hard drive, but still it was 100 megabytes.
Wow. Then I guess I'm actually even older than you.
Well, no. I'm
I was working on
I didn't get into computers until, well, I mean, in I guess in middle school we had a VIC-20, and then we had a Commodore 64, and then I didn't touch a computer until graduate school.
Oh, okay. So you had a gap. So I was the kid that was like in the 1980s who had the Trash 80 Model 3, or the TRS 80 Model 3. I guess I should clarify that for folks that don't know. Trash 80, just right. The nickname for the Radio Shack / Tandy TRS 80 Model 3 quintessential computing device of the early 1980s. Mine had the whopping 64K of kilobytes of extended RAM, in which I first learned to program tic-tac-toe in BASIC. Then we did it with Commodore 64, and I actually wrote a piano keyboard program. So I was actually doing music synthesis in BASIC.
Awesome.
That took forever to write, but it made like the QWERTY row and then the ASDF row the white and black keys of a keyboard.
Awesome.
Yeah, and then
I don't even remember the things that I wrote. I know I wrote things, but I apparently killed those brain cells at some point in the 80s, probably at a fraternity party. I remember playing games, and you would load them using cassette tapes.
Yes, and you would actually hear the same squeals as you would normally on a modem.
Right.
Data load kind of stuff.
And sometimes it would drop a bit or two, and you'd have to start all over, which really sucked because it was 30 minutes to load a game.
Well, I mean, ECC didn't exist. You know, error correction was like, what? We don't have time for that.
Right.
But it's only got to be one or the other, so let's just crapshoot. Let's see what happens.
We do sound like the cyber grandpas. Back in my day, it took 30 minutes to play a game.
Yeah, so I guess on to the last story, which I threw in, which is the Netherlands has actually decided they're going to hand count ballots for their parliamentary elections.
Well, there's only like 4 people there.
Yeah. Isn't Wim part of that? Like, no, wait, he's going to be insulted now.
Right, not the Netherlands. I don't know. Is he? I don't know.
Well, they're Dutch. They're freaky deaky Dutch. So, so they have decided for their next.
Some of the best 70s porn was produced in the Netherlands. But anyway, go ahead. taking this to a
Well,
dark corner.
no, everything comes back to Rule 34.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, they apparently have decided that based on everything, they're going to shame Russia and ditch their software and go back to old school paper ballot. Talk about, what we've been talking about. They're going to go back to hand counting ballots.
I'd like to know. Does it say how many ballots they have to hand count? It's got to take.
So,
It's got to take days.
well, they said the last parliamentary election, according to the article, which is what this is about, the next parliamentary election. It's not just any election, but the next parliamentary election in the Netherlands. They're actually going to be. There are 12.7 million people
That's
eligible to vote.
quite a
Eligible.
few votes. Yeah, that's going to take some time. See, I don't get this. This is another situation where the narrative outweighs the truth. The Russian hacked U.S. election. Bullshit. The Russians use propaganda maybe to influence the election. They probably in them and the alt-right use the tools of anonymous and memes and trolling in order to, control the rhetoric, maybe control the rhetoric of the election. But there are so many different voting systems in the United States. It would be almost hard to.
Right. So I think
There are
that
people.
I want to say something that I hope will also influence people to encourage their local electoral boards to think about, which is that we have a balance point of technologies of, and I say this as a former election officer for Loudoun County in Virginia, having experience with that election system through the 2004, 2006, 2008 elections, at least, that there are the touchscreen electronic voting systems, which are made by Diebold and I think one or two other manufacturers, which are the full electronic systems that actually can be hacked. Now, in Virginia, at least, those systems had the capability of being connected to a phone line and doing a data connection to a central server and reporting their tallies immediately into a central system. But Virginia did not use that. We just did a local tally, and it's literally a PCM CIA card, like old school card, like not even like SD, like micro SD or anything like that. Right. It had the data on it. The only problem I had with those systems is that when you start the run at the beginning of the setup, you run your quote unquote zero tapes, which you print out. Every machine shows all counts are zero at the beginning of the election day. Then at the end of the day, you have your X amount of votes were cast. Those break down into so and so many for this party, so and so many for that party, so and so many for this candidate, so and so many for that candidate, and so on.
Right.
My only problem with that is that it doesn't show in any way, shape, or form that you can audit that as long as the total of the individual dissection votes matches the total votes cast, you're fine. But you don't know if the machine decided that, one of every 2 votes for one candidate should actually go to the other candidate. You have no idea if that logic exists in the system.
Right.
So the other system, the old school system, quote unquote, is the Scantron form ballots, which are the paper ballot with the old school, like many of us in the Grandpa InfoSec club know, where you fill in the little bubbles and the computer digitally, like optically reads the form and looks for the filled in bubbles to decide what the cast is. And if it decides it can't figure out, or you overvoted, you had 2 candidates for a position that only allows 1 vote, e.g. for the president, then it rejects it and says the ballot's invalid. Then you fill in all the bubbles and say this ballot's invalid. We're not going to know how they voted. Start over. Here's your second take. Put in the machine again. The machine says, I understand it, so therefore a human can understand it. There's no stray marks. There's no hanging chads. There's no ambiguity in that sense. You can undervote.
Right.
You cast your ballot, and the machine tallies everything, so the tally is fast. You just print off the tape from the machine. But if there's a question,
Yeah.
you now still have the paper ballots that you pull out of the secure hopper, and you can recount those in human form.
You're
or
breaking up on me. I don't know if it's me, my connection, or your connection.
Okay.
You're back. Go ahead.
So you can rerun any ambiguity. You can tally quickly still. The machine takes care of all of that. Right. And those Scantron systems, I think, are the best balance of paper trail, audit trail, quick counting, electronic, but not electronic.
I agree.
Less tamper-proof, and everybody should ask for those systems to be in use everywhere.
Those are the prevailing systems here in West Virginia are Scantrons. Although it depends on each individual county, because each individual county, it's up to them how they run their election. And I'm sure in Vermont there are still smaller places that still hand count votes.
I think there are, and of course we also have a lot of more local issues that are still decided by that quintessential Democratic icon, Democratic small d as opposed to
large
party.
D. Right.
Where we still have town meeting.
Yeah.
It's actually in March. So it is literally, I still go to the town hall in March on Tuesday, and we're going to do X, Y, Z. I can stand up and be recognized by the floor like anybody else and make a motion, and Robert's Rules of Order applies, and we vote, and that's how the town decides what they're going to do for the year.
That's awesome. That is awesome. Yeah, we don't do that here. It's very much, machine politics. We sort of moved away from it, but it's hard to be a little guy and have your say even in a small town. My town that I grew up in has about 2,000 people in it, and it's I don't think it would be hard even to get in to see the city council on a regular council meeting. So it's I don't know. I guess it's the difference between the New England mentality about what democracy is as opposed to here, and it's different in other states.
Yeah, I think it's also interesting that it's. I have to say that living in Northern Virginia for a long time and then going to Vermont, back home to Vermont, it was an interesting thing, like for the marriage license, to go into Burlington City Hall, and there was no metal detector. There were no security guards from some 2-bit security company.
Right.
There was none of that. It was, you walk into City Hall and it's like there's nothing around. There's some bulletin boards on the walls with community notices, and
And Vermont is a constitutional carry state, isn't it?
Vermont is you don't need a permit for anything in terms of firearms.
Right.
So the only state I think that's like that.
So even concealed carry, you don't need a permit, right?
Concealed, open, any kind of
West
weapon.
Virginia is a constitutional carry state. I could carry concealed right now without any permit if I wanted to. I'm not much of a concealed carrier.
Vermont's open, concealed, whatever the hell you want to do. There's a guy who's actually famous it's Bennington or Brattleboro, who's famous for wearing like a cowboy hat, and he's got 2 6-shooters on his hips all the time.
Wow.
So you can kind of do what you want, but you can go into City Hall in Burlington, and you can actually go to the mayor's office and tap on the door frame and say, hey, want to talk to you for a second.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, sure. What do you want to talk about?
That's great. I'm glad it's not dead, and I'm glad that idea still holds true. It's probably need more of that in our society. Although people complain about our new president having a Twitter account, I'm like, well, what? I mean, you said you wanted transparency.
I agree with you on that. I think that I am all for Facebook live streams from the White House. I am all for, the president tweeting, as actually even the previous administration did with the @POTUS handle.
Right.
I am all for more transparency if it's truly transparent. The quashing of tweeting from National Park Service and some of the other things is kind of questionable. But overall, by all means, use social media, use Facebook, use Twitter, use Instagram, use Snapchat, which just had a crazy $3 billion IPO for Snapchat.
I missed that. Somehow.
I'm all for all of that, but at the same time, you also should be accessible to, I think the citizenry should be able to go into Congress and go into not necessarily Congress itself, but certainly the different, I forget the names of them offhand, but the actual Senate and House buildings that are actually the offices on either side there on Capitol Hill.
Mm-hmm.
You should be able to go in and talk to your representative and say, hey, dude, I think you're misrepresenting me. This is what I want you to think about.
Right.
So that'll complete the Grandpa InfoSec.
Here in the reading. Well, thanks for coming on. We're about, I think we're at about an hour. So I appreciate it, Mark. And anytime you want to come back, you're welcome.
Well, very much appreciated as well. Love to do an episode with Amanda and some of the others as well. So if we can get them on too, that'd be super awesome. But always happy to chat with you as well, my friend.
Well, I appreciate it. And Blair wanted to apologize. She said she didn't get to talk to you much during Secure WV HackerCon. She wanted to, and I guess how it is at a conference. It's all craziness.
Yes, that's quite all right. And there will certainly be future opportunities to do so.
But yeah, we'll do one soon. I need to get Benny and Rick and the normal guys and girls back on. But I appreciate it. I'm going to sign off now. Thanks everyone for listening. We'll talk to you all hopefully soon. Good night, everybody.